We'll look at it in a minute. There we go. I believe because. So if you think about our society and our culture and what seems to be prevalent, this statement, I believe, is very true. People almost invariably arrive at their beliefs not on the basis of proof, but on the basis of what they find attractive. So think about some of, even in your own life at different times, or perhaps even at the moment, the things that maybe you believe, the things maybe you have got backwards, and see if that statement doesn't hold some truth. It's not based on proof, but based on what is attractive. So can you think of some instances or some times when people act that way? Anything that comes to mind? All right, religion in general, absolutely. Topics of abortion, topics of sexuality, topics of transgender sexuality. The list can go on. Marriage, how we view that, just our walk in general. We don't always base those on fact or proof, but sometimes on what feels good. James Sire wrote a book called Why Should Anyone Believe Anything at All? And in the book, and he also does lectures, he asks his students about why they believe. Why do they believe what they believe? And so on a sociological reasons, parents, friends, society, culture. So oftentimes we believe things because our parents told us, right? That's the way we were raised. And I'm not saying that that's bad, but can our parents be wrong? All right, so is our parents, friends, society, and culture, is that a good reason to believe what we believe? No. It reminds me of a story of a woman who asked her mother, said, Mama, why do we cut the ham bone off when we cook our ham? And she said, I don't know, what my mother did. Let me ask her. So she called her mother and said, why do we cut the ham bone, the end of the ham bone off before we cook our ham? She said, I don't know, that's what my mama did. Let me call you grandmama. Called her mother and said, why do we cut the end of the ham bone off before we cook the ham? She said, well, we didn't have a pot big enough for it to fit in. So you see that the reasoning behind it, not that it's bad to cut the end of the ham bone off, right? But the lady didn't know why. There was no reason. She had a big enough pan. And so psychological reasons, comfort, peace of mind, meaning, purpose, hope, identity. If we believe because of these things. So what are some things? Well, we mentioned some things. But do you see people believing something because it's comfortable for them? Because they have a peace of mind. It makes sense to them. Because of meaning, the way that they see it, or the purpose, perhaps it gives them hope and identity. Religious reasons. So some people believe because of religious convictions. And keep in mind, in this statement, we're very secular in the word of religion, but is believing something based just on Scripture because of in this book, it calls pastor or priest, a guru, a rabbi, an imam, or a church. Is that really the best reason to believe something? So we have more than one religious book out there, right? We've got the Bible. Of course, that's mainly what that is what we're going to believe here, but there's other religious books, are there not? And so those are not always the best reasons. So we have philosophical reasons, consistency, coherence, completeness, best explanation of all the evidence. And when I say philosophical, I'm not talking about Plato or Socrates. I'm talking about being able to induce evidence based on what we can observe and what we can see. And so although we worship and we serve an invisible God, are the evidences or the effects of God, are they visible? Yeah, we say absolutely. So trying to help us and help others, why do we believe, and why, if some of those other reasonings may be, and I'm not saying they're all, depends on what you're talking about, they may be applicable. But the first principles, so when we look at, we're going to try to wrestle our way through some logical thinking, which is maybe difficult for me, but we're going to try it. So there are some that would argue that the culture that we're talking or that we're speaking in or teaching in is a driver in how we view things. So in an Eastern culture, let's just not to pick on one, but let's throw out India. So if I'm in India and I'm raised in India, most likely my religious convictions are of what faith? I'm sorry? Hindu, okay? So they can have a either or. So in the Eastern culture, it's very common to have an either and or. In other words, they might say, I can believe in Jesus, that Jesus is a way to salvation, but there may be other paths. It can be either this path or it can be that path. And so we talked in night one about, and a little bit in night two, or the second lesson, about the dangers of that, and it's called pluralism or parallelism, and that those things are difficult. Western logic, either or, I'm sorry, I got those backwards. The Eastern culture is both and the Western is either or. So for a Western culture, we normally think of it's either this way or it's that way. It can't be both and. And hopefully we'll see that. There is one principle and one law of first principles, and I would argue that we know this. We know it without really being taught this. But it's a self-evident first principle of thought that says contradictory claims cannot both be true at the same time in the same sense. So think about that for a minute. Contradictory terms cannot both be true at the same time in the same sense. So you might say that either there is a God or there's not a God. That Christ rose from the dead or he did not rise from the dead. There's no middle ground. In fact, the second principle is like that. It's called the law of excluded middle. It's a self-evident first principle of thought that says something either is or not, such as either Jesus rose or he did not. There's no third alternative. There's nothing else that fits in there. So we have self-evidence non-contradiction. So we mentioned some non-contradiction on night one, that to say there is no truth, we called that a self-defeating claim, right? Because if you say there is no truth, then my response is, well, is that true? Is it true that there's no truth? Truth. And it defeats itself. So looking at and trying to way towards some logical reasoning. There are a couple of methods, one of them being very scientific. In fact, both of them are very scientific. Induction, the method of drawing general conclusions from specific observations. So the scientific method is that of observation. So scientists do tests, right? They test theories, they test reactions, and they record and they interpret those. Induction. And so something that we can induce, right? So gravity is not visible. Well, what's a great way to test gravity? All right, so pull your legs up, right? Jump off a cliff. In fact, we induce or have an induction about gravity very often. You slide something off the edge of a table, what's going to happen to it? It's going to fall, right? It's going to hit the floor. We do that often enough. We can induce and have an induction, if you want to say, that objects will fall from a table when we let them go. Now, they may or may not be 100% true all the time, but we can induct that that is true. Deduction, the process of lining up premise in an argument and arriving at a valid conclusion. So when we think about that, logical reasoning, and so here's a couple examples. Both are deducted as true. All men are mortal. Spencer is a man, therefore Spencer is mortal. And so you can see the deduction, right? See the logical path. It may be more evident if we put in a false sense. All men are four-legged reptiles. Zachary is a man. Therefore, Zachary is a four-legged reptile. Now, we know that the conclusion is false, right? We know all men are not four-legged reptiles. Now, ladies, I'm not going to have you answer that one, right? Y'all may think so. But we know that's not true. And how do we know it's not true? Well, we have observed, right? We have observed that not 100%. I'm sure there are possibly some three-legged guys out there. There definitely, we know we have some amputees, that not all men have two legs, but we've observed that most men do. And we have observed that they're definitely not four-legged reptiles. So we have deducted that the statement is true, but on the second one, the inductive, we have induced that it is false. And I'm not trying to get too technical. We're going to move out of this. But understanding how to logically reason with people. Because what happens, what do you see, and I don't want to pick on the transgender culture, but what happens in that culture? What is that a very violent and very intense discussion, or is that laid back? How passionate are the ones that are arguing that you can be a male and a female or be something else? Are they passionate? All right, it very, very angry, right? It gets very angry with that. We can observe those things. We try to help logically reason. Is that I can be both male and female, and again, I'm not saying there's not. There are some abnormalities that may create some that may end up that way, but normally speaking, can you be both male and female? No. It's a self-defeating or a contradictory claim. How are truths about God known? We use observation and induction to discover the existence of God. Observation and induction help us investigate the ultimate religious question, does God exist? Can we investigate the effects of an invisible God? And we've asked that and answered that. Yes, we can. The great American problem. It would be argued that the great American problem is one of ignorance, also one of apathy. And when a question is asked sometimes, the answer is, I don't know and I don't care. So it covers both, right? And so as we deal with individuals who do not believe, not all are ignorant, obviously. There's a lot of very smart atheistic people that claim to be atheists, but when we investigate, when someone disagrees with our point of view, how much investigation do we normally want to do? As much as it takes? Okay. All right. Well, and as well, sometimes we just shut down, right? We dismiss people who disagree with us oftentimes. Help me out there, Eddie. All right, amen. Definitely. Definitely. Can you move one more? Okay. No, sir. All right, so morality. We move into a matter of morality. While many claim that truth and morality does not matter, they do not believe that when someone treats them immorally. All right, they do not believe that when someone treats them immorally, they don't believe that when somebody treats them immorally. In other words, if you don't believe that morality matters, but yet someone robs or steals or lies to you, what's your response? What's your response? All right? Anger, right? So you do get mad. So morality. Somebody claim that lying isn't wrong, but just lie to them and see how they respond. Morality matters to us in matters of money. Does it matter if the paycheck's right? Or if we're paying somebody to do some work? Medicine. We've got some doctors in here. We've got some pharmacists over here and nurses. And is medicine a big deal to be right? Now, we care about morality in medicine, in family, work, just mortality, those type things. Morality matters. Morality matters because success in life often depends on moral choices a person makes. Choices regarding sex, marriage, children, drugs, money, business, dealings, etc. And we can see that oftentimes when it affects the bottom line, that people have a different opinion on morality. And so the last argument that we'll do, we're not going to get into that deeply tonight, is one of the moral argument. But morality matters. All laws legislate morality. The question is, whose morality will be legislated? So stop and think about that. So again, don't want to put words in people's mouth, but abortion is killing unborn children, so is killing wrong? All right. Therefore, can we deduce that abortion can be wrong? All right. The question is, whose morality is legislated? Every law declares one behavior right and the opposite wrong. Whose morality should be legislated on issues such as abortion, euthanasia, right? It's not something that we deal with, really a discussion of euthanasia, but they are topics that get thrown around sometimes. These issues directly impact the lives and health of real people. So morality, one of the greatest arguments for the existence of God is morality. Without God, it's a subjective, right? It's subjective. Whose laws should we follow? Matter of fact, you go back to the Nazis. The Nazis killed Jews. Was it legal in Germany to kill Jews? Well, they would say that it was. I would agree. But Nuremberg trials, the Chief Justice argued that there was a law above German law. So, morality. Truth and religion. Does truth and religion matter? If the Bible is true, then everyone's eternal destiny can be read from the pages. So, if the Bible is true, which I believe it to be, then you can tell about your eternal destination by reading the pages. If the Bible is not true, then Christians are wasting a lot of time and money proclaiming its truths. In fact, Paul would say that we're to be pitied among really more than anyone else, right? If the Quran is right, then I'm in big trouble. If the atheists are right, then we just as well all lie and cheat and steal and get what we want because that is all there is. Now, did not mean that to sound disrespectful to a different view, but in all actuality, if there is no God, if there is no higher moral standard, then why should I do something moral? Why not just do what I want to do to get ahead? Matter of fact, you watch some of your Wild West movies and things like that, and you see what that looks like, is everyone does what they want to. In fact, the Bible talks about that there's some times when everyone did what was right in their own eye. And that's first time that's mentioned right before the flood. So, Albert Einstein, When we're going to move into our first argument for God, and it is one of the cosmological argument. I'm trying not to say that like we're putting makeup on. I may get it wrong, but Albert Einstein in, I believe it was 1916, came up with or was working with something that we call the general theory of relativity. And Einstein's calculations showed that the universe was expanding. It was not constant. Einstein desired it to be constant. Einstein would later say that it was irritating that it was not constant. Einstein believed that the universe was eternal. As a matter of fact, many astronomers use that term of eternal. In other words, sort of a pantheist, that the universe is in itself God. About 3 years later, it was found that it was not, that it was actually expanding. So Einstein in 1916 found that out with his calculations. He didn't like it. They say he put a fudge factor in. So he divided by zero, which I'm not a great mathematician, but Lonnie, you're the mathematician. Do you ever divide by zero? No, it's a no-no. Well, that's what Einstein did. He divided by zero to make his calculations show that there was no expansion. He said it was irritating to him that the universe seemed to be expanding. By 1919, Arthur Eddington conducted an experiment during a solar eclipse which confirmed that the general relativity was indeed true. By 1922, the fudge factor had been found. So they had a mathematician doing all the math work. They found the fudge factor. In 1927, Edwin Hubble actually observed the expanding universe through a 100-inch telescope. So by 1927, they had mathematical evidence or proof that the universe was expanding. Those calculations had been double-checked. It had been visualized through a solar eclipse, and by 1927, it had been observed through a telescope. In fact, today, almost everyone now believes that the universe and time itself had a beginning at the Big Bang. This is one of the noted astronomers, Stephen Hawking, and this is Roger Penrose in an article, but pretty much commonly held by scientists, the astronomers, that the universe had a beginning. And that is problematic. Why is that problematic for atheists? All right? If something had a beginning, then it had to have a creator. It had to have a cause. So logical form. Everything that had a beginning had a cause. The universe had a beginning, therefore the universe had a cause. And so we've sort of put that into that same logical format that we had for Spencer being a man. And so everything had a beginning, had a cause. Causality. Everything that had a beginning had a cause. The laws of causality. Without this law, science is impossible. Although many police officers have heard of a car miraculously appearing out of nowhere, we all know that the car had a cause to end up in front of us. So that story, right? Any teenager had a wreck, right? Just a car appeared, right? Appeared out of nowhere. I would assume that we all are pretty confident that there's not a little cookie monster in our house eating our cookies while we're at church, that things don't magically appear without some type of cause. The law of causality is one that says everything that had a beginning had a cause. So there's two choices that you can go with. Someone created something out of nothing, or no one created something out of nothing. Which one is more reasonable? All right, someone. Yeah, creator, the creator. Someone created something out of nothing. No one created something out of nothing, and I'm not trying to poke a lot of fun, but the atheists do not believe, they say, in miracles. Which one sounds more miraculous? That someone created something or no one created something out of nothing? Yeah, that no one created. Outside, someone outside of time, space, and matter had to have caused the beginning. So at the beginning, I think we've got it a little bit later on the slide, but I'll mention it now. The universe began from nothing. There was no time, no space, no matter, no dust, no nothing else to start that. The universe was not created from something behind there. Matter of fact, Stephen Dawkins would say to even talk about the time before the Big Bang would be like telling someone to go south from the South Pole. It's improbable, impossible, that it did not exist. But for something or someone to create the universe and create all the time, all the space, and all the matter, they had to be outside of time, space, and matter. So we go back to this someone. This someone has to be someone outside of time, space, and matter to create something out of nothing. You think about it. Do we know of God? SURGE. There are 5 lines of evidence that we're going to look at, and the acronym to remember those are SURGE. But the first one is the secondary law of thermodynamics. And I am not a scientist. I am out of my element, so y'all are getting what I have read. But it's the study of matter and energy. This law states, among other things, that the universe is running out of usable energy. And the example, to help us in a more simplistic term understand it, you've got so many gallons of gas in your car. When you crank your car, you're using gas. And your car can only run for so long on the energy or the gas that it has. And so at creation, all the energy that was created. And the universe is consuming energy. And so eventually, it will run out of usable energy. The second law of thermodynamics. And within that law says there's a law of entropy. Entropy, get it out? Entropy. Nature has a way of bringing things to disorder. That is, with time, things naturally fall apart. The second law suggests that the universe had a beginning since we still have order left. So look at our universe and look at our world. Do we have order or do we have chaos? Order. We can tell pretty much. You look at the calendar or go and pull up your app, it's going to tell you what time the sun's going to come up, right? If the sun comes up, it's going to tell you when it does. We can calculate the seasons. We can calculate forward and backwards how the sky looked. We have order, but because we still have order left, that law says there had to be a beginning because things are going toward disorder. Excuse me. Yes, sir. That's right. Without a doubt. As we get older, we acknowledge and recognize that we only have so much energy, so much left. Expansion. So time, space, and matter from nothing. The universe is expanding and is expanding from a single point. Space itself is expanding. What is came from nothing. So I don't know that I can fully myself grasp what I'm trying to say. But if you reordered or rewound the universe, they tell me it will end up in one space, one spot. As a matter of fact, that spot is, minute. It's not like it's a spot as big as this building. It's a spot that we can't even see. That everything that is came from that spot. And before that, there was no time, there was no space, there was no matter. Everything came from that one location. And they have shown it, they have proved it, they have calculated it, and there's other ways of doing it. So if something is expanding, it had to be expanding from somewhere. Does that make sense? So the universe had a beginning. Radiation. discovered by two scientists from Bell Labs in 1965 by accident. They were actually doing some experiments, and they had an antenna. They were in New Jersey on one of the buildings, and so they had pigeons, but they didn't know why they were getting the readings they were getting, and they thought it was the pigeons or the droppings. They got rid of the pigeons, cleaned all the antennas. They still were getting some radiation, and they didn't know from where. Ended up as cosmic background radiation, and it's left over from, I'm going to use the term Big Bang, because that's the common terminology, but from the beginning of the universe. Light and heat from the creation of the universe. Light, the wavelengths had diminished or lengthened enough that you cannot see it, but the heat still exists. As early as 1948, scientists predicted that this radiation would be out there. However, no one had looked for it, and they found it by accident. So it is radiation from the creation. There's also another provable and proved theory. It's called the Great Galaxy Seeds. NASA launched a COBE, Cosmic Background Explorer. COBE looked for the ripples and temperature differences suspected if the Big Bang was correct. So COBE was designed to verify and to test the idea of the Big Bang. Hailed as the most significant discovery, the ripples were there and showed that the universe was finely tweaked as to allow just enough matter to congregate and to allow galaxy formations, but not enough to cause the universe to collapse back on itself. And so Hawkins would say that 1 part and 1 to the 27th million, if at the creation or at the Big Bang, that the universe had been, or the, let's call the gravity, the strength of that had been altered by 1 part and 1 to the 27 millionth power, that the universe would have collapsed back on itself. So the whole point, what they found was that not only did it verify that the universe came from one single point, but it came from an explosion or came from a bang, let's call it, and that it was finely tuned. It was not chaotic. It was not just random. And so when they looked, the other thing that's above my mind is when they looked, they were looking at light that was old. In other words, they were looking at galaxies yet to be formed, because light has to travel and it takes time for light to travel. So what they were actually seeing was in the past, not present or future. And so what an outstanding revelation they had, and a great discovery. So Einstein, the theory of general relativity was the beginning of the end for the idea that the universe was eternal. And so what are some problems if the universe is eternal and not created? What are some problems that it gives us? So what does the Bible say about creation? Is the universe eternal, or was it created? All right, so creation. If the universe is eternal, in other words, it has been and always will be, and that it's just always been here, then we have a problem, because it differs from the biblical narrative. And so understanding what the statement is of the universe being eternal, the theory demands an absolute beginning for time, space, and matter. It shows that time, space, and matter are correlative. In other words, you can't have one without the other. From this theory, scientists predicted and then found the expanding universe, the radiation afterglow, the great galaxy seeds that were precisely tweaked to allow the universe to form into its present state. So we have at least, if not, there's more, but at least 5 discoveries and scientific inductions that show that the universe had a beginning, had a cause. Now, many scientists are still trying to wrestle with the cause. And so this class itself at this moment is not directly designed to point us to the cause. but I would suggest that we already knew everything that I've been saying. That in Genesis 1, it says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. That we know that, but sometimes we know that because we read it, because we've been told it, because just it's what we believe. But the whole point I'm trying to get us all to think about is, why do you believe that? So faith, Hebrews 11 tells us that faith is an evidence, right? It is the substance of things not seen. We can see the unseen. We have the effects of God. Absolutely. Time, space, matter, that things are expanding. And things expanding had to have a beginning. And so think about those things. We're going to continue with some other arguments and then end up on a few doctrinal matters. But I do appreciate your time and your attention. And if there's something you want me to discuss, we'll definitely try to look at that. Thank you.